Okay, let's use our newfound JavaScript knowledge to do some client-side validation on a form. Okay, so I'm going to go back to the same form we've been working through before. We already have client-side validation there. We can enter what is your request, what is your favorite color, and what do we want to have happen for client-side validation. Two different things. First of all, when I go and type in my favorite color, or my quest, I have a very, very long quest here. I want to go ahead and have that error message appear instantly. Okay, that's one of the reasons why we do the validation client side, is for the user experience to get very quick things. And the other thing that happens is when we go and click the submit button, I want to make sure it doesn't actually submit. Okay, which is the case in what we'll end up with here. So how do we get the form to do this? How do we do the JavaScript so that we get the messages put out as soon as we enter something incorrectly, and we don't actually submit until everything is valid? Well, we're going to have a similar structure to what we did client-side. Remember how for the client-side error checking we had two validation functions, one for every individual field, and then a big master validation function that just called those individual validation functions. And did something similar. Now there we were returning error strings. We're going to want something a little bit different. We're going to want to have a Boolean for the final submit button to make sure it doesn't submit. The browser is going to want a Boolean. Yes or no, should I really be submitting here? So we're going to get a Boolean, not a string. We still want the string, of course. Hopefully the exact same string character per character. We already have server side. Might as well make those jibe if there's no reason to have them different. Okay, so we still need to do the strings, but we're going to have the error message. So there's going to be two JavaScript events that we're going to pay attention to. We already saw we had a form, we had some JavaScript where we had an onClick attribute, and clicking on that caused our JavaScript code to run. Okay, well, there's more events than just onClick, and one interesting thing about these different JavaScript events is that you can actually call them on almost any node. It doesn't have to be just onClick doesn't have to be just inside an A tag. Okay, so it turns out there's a bunch of different tags. Let's look over here and see some of them. There are JavaScript events on load, on unload, on click, on double click, on mouse down, on mouse up, on mouse over, on mouse move, on mouse out. Oh my goodness, on focus. Yeah, so the ones we care about, we already saw on click. On focus, what does that mean? That focus is a GUI term for, hey, if I type in something, who's receiving that? Which of these different input boxes is receiving the input? Which one has focus? Okay. The event on focus is for a specific event. When it receives focus, we'll run its onFocus attribute. We'll run any JavaScript sitting in that attribute. Okay. What about, I sort of want something, so I'm typing something in, and I want to run, when do I want to run my validation code? As soon as they are done typing things in and move on to a different input field. Okay. So that should be, that's not on focus, that's, I guess, off focus. It's exactly when you are no longer on focus. Well, all the events start with on, so instead of off focus, they call it on blur. That's the opposite of on focus. Okay. So on blur might be one event that I want to use in my HTML. I might want to include an on blur attribute with some JavaScript sitting in there. But actually a more appropriate one probably is onchange. Onchange is similar to on blur, except that event is fired whenever there is a change to the value attribute. Okay, so in particular, if somebody's just sort of tabbing through the different fields, and they arrive to a field that say already had an error message or something like that, or was already valid or whatever, and then they just tab out of it, onBlur gets called. But if they never change the value in there, onchange wouldn't get called. So onchange seems like the right place to do this validation. As soon as this value changes, and I should mention too, it's a little bit smart. It's not on keystroke. Okay, there's an on keystroke event on every single keystroke. Onchange is a little bit smart enough to wait till the user is finished inputting the value, and then it fires the onchange event. Okay, that's probably good if there's a minimum length of 10 and they're typing. You don't want to have them type the first character and get an error message of, if you consider that a change of the input already, you don't want them to say, a window to pop up saying, hey, you're 9 characters too short, and they hit another character, hey, you're 8 characters too short, and hey, you're 7 characters too short. The user's like, come on, I'm trying, give me a chance. So it's probably good that onchange waits for the entire thing to get entered and then triggers as soon as the user is done changing that value and the value is really different than before, it will fire onchange. Okay. Onchange is good. There's one more attribute so onchange is going to be good for individual fields. Okay, we're going to put some JavaScript code on the onchange for every individual field and validate it as soon as they're done entering that field. For the overall form, should we really submit, there's another attribute, onsubmit. It's an attribute you tend to put on inside the form tag in the HTML. And there we're going to go ahead and run code that validates everything. Now you might say, Barland, why do I need to validate everything as the user is filling out the form? Every time they entered a value, I validated it. And the answer is, well, what if they never went to a form? Maybe there's a required form and they never even changed that value, so onchange never went, they never focused on it, they never did anything. We still want to make sure onsubmit goes and pulls up that error message, shows that error message. So, and it's going to be, I can tell you what the code for that is going to look like already. We're going to do, we'll have form onsubmit, and then to say return, the code that I'm going to run is going to do return of validateAll. validateAll, I'm going to write that. That's my big master, like all error messages in the server side, except that it just returns a Boolean. It does make sure every other input is valid. And in the course of doing that, if anything is invalid, we're going to want to have that message display on the screen. So, okay. So let's go actually look at the code to actually get what we want. So, form0 validated.php, I think is what we were calling this thing. Okay. So we're going to add some JavaScript functions here. I'm going to start with JavaScript to validate. Let's actually go down to the tags. Let's go and what is your request? And we have an input thing here. We're going to go ahead and add an onchange event right here. Let me do that. Boop. Here's the input tag. I'm going to add a new event. It's going to be a little bit long. It's going to be onchange gets, and I'm just going to go ahead and call. I want to do any JavaScript here. What is this JavaScript going to do? It's going to make sure that the quest is, not too long. Doesn't care about spaces, I guess, in that sense. We already saw from the server side that all our text things could sort of be have one function to handle all 3 text inputs, right? So we had string is valid message, or string invalid message, I think it was called. Took in a string and told you, gave you back the message, the error message. I want something similar to that. I'm going to go ahead and I'm still going to have the function string invalid message. Okay. And what do we need to pass to that? We need to go ahead and pass it, this is JavaScript now, the value of this text input. So I guess I could do something along the lines of document.getElement by ID of quest. That will bring the input node of the DOM, and then look up its value field. Gosh, I bet, although I have a name attribute there, I probably need an ID attribute as well. If my name was quest, and it was the only thing with that name in this document, make the ID quest. Don't call it something different. I'll just, that way leads madness. Okay, great. So this will go ahead and string invalid message. I want to pass it the actual string. Well, that will go ahead and get me that string. You know, I can be a little bit smarter about it, though. It turns out, a little bit object-oriented-ish, JavaScript will have a variable, an implicit variable already there defined for me called this, that is a reference to the current node. If I'm in the, so again, this is the onchange event of this input node. So this refers to the input node already. I don't need to do a get element by ID if I'm already sitting inside that node. Okay, so that's kind of nice. That's, okay, anyway. What else? This and 15 and false for the fact that spaces, no, true, spaces were allowed. Okay. Great, I'm going to go ahead and do this. Run this JavaScript code. Wait, this returns the error message. I'm going to actually want to take that error message and throw it on the screen there, right? The moment they type that. Yeah, so I could go ahead and do some DOM surgery. We have seen how to do that. I'm going to go and locate the node and then add a new node and add some text into it with the error message inside of it with the result of this function call. I could go ahead and write that right here in this onchange attribute. But I'm already thinking ahead. I'm going to have to do it here for the quest. I'm going to have to do the exact same thing for spaces allowed. Spaces allowed will do a string invalid message with 20 and false or whatever. I'll look up the favorite color rather. So I have to do it for the quest, the favorite color, and the message field. Yeah, I don't want to write that same code that goes and makes a new node of the tree and inserts an error message into that. Hey, I know. I'll have a function reportError. ReportError is going to take a string and say, hey, splice this string into the tree as an error message. Gosh, I guess it will need to know more than just string. It will need to know where to put it. I'll say, hey, go ahead and put it right next to the current node, something like that. Something along those lines. Okay, so now I'm good. I can go ahead and do this onchange. I'll go down to the favorite color, and there's going to be a similar next to my input. Let me go ahead and put that here. In fact, I'm going to copy and paste this line, and what do I need to change? I need to change because I use this. I actually don't need to change anything except the limit was, oh, actually it was 20 up here, right? I recall correctly, 15 down here, and spaces weren't allowed. Wait a minute, Barland. This 15 and 20 and the true and false, those are supposed to come from our global constants file. I'm going back and I'm reintroducing that, and sure enough, we already did have a global constants file that we had factored out before. We had an array called spaces allowed. Okay, so this is an interesting little thing. This is what I want to end up with, but I want to get this 20 not by hard coding it in here. I want to get the 20 by going in PHP and looking up max lengths of quest. Okay, just like we did down here. In fact, hey, I'm going to even copy and paste this a little bit here. Copy. So yeah, I'm going to go and replace that 20 with that thing that I just copied. Echo max lengths of quest. Yeah. Okay. I'll put it here. Now, this seam might, if you're thinking, you might be getting a little bit dizzy here. It's like, whoa, can I embed PHP code in the middle of JavaScript code? Is that it? What? What? Oh, what's going on here? Well, the answer is no. Remember how PHP works? We're just running this PHP program and all it's doing is printing. We're printing the HTML file. That HTML file happens to have attribute and attribute values inside of it. So one of those attribute values now happens to be JavaScript code. The PHP purpose is still just to make sure we print exactly the HTML we want that includes all the embedded JavaScript exactly the way we want it. Okay, so sure enough, I'm in PHP. I'm doing these implicit printing here, so I'm not in PHP mode. And yeah, I'm like, yeah, this is the JavaScript that I wanted to get. Oh, I wanted 20 here. Oh yeah, that will give me the 20. And similarly, spaces allowed of quest is going to give me this here. I can go ahead and enter PHP mode, echo spaces allowed of quest. This is a little bit trickier. I mean, I know that spaces allowed of quest is, so there's my PHP block ending. Here ends my PHP block. Now remember in PHP, this is so space allowed of quest is either true or false. How does PHP print true? Wait, it printed it just as 1. And false printed as nothing at all. Oh my goodness. I guess here's what I want to do. I have to say that here, this is a little bit, I'm getting a little bit frustrated now at what the commonplace technology is making me do. Write a PHP program that is printing HTML that contains embedded something else, and I'm, okay. Okay, I have a Boolean, I want to print it. I guess I should say something like echo, I guess I could do this little ternary operator here. If this is true, then what do I want to echo? I want to echo true, otherwise echo false. Okay. So I could go ahead and do that. That will go ahead and work and be correct. When I run this PHP program, I'll get an onchange equal report error, blah, 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 string invalid message with this dot value, comma, 15, comma, TRUE. Okay, or FALSE. I'm going to be needing to do this in a bunch of places, and I was like, oh, how tedious I have to have this echo. If this is, if this Boolean is true, use the string TRUE, otherwise use the string FAL. Maybe I could make a helper function, a PHP helper function that, given a Boolean, either returns TRUE or FAL. Oh my goodness. It turns out that one is kind of built in. There's a little bit more of a more general function called JSON encode. This is a PHP function. Remember, we're in PHP right now. JSON encode takes any PHP value. It's a little bit like var dump. Takes any PHP value and returns a string that is suitable for use in JSON. And by dumb luck, in JSON, TRUE is what they want for true, and FALSE is what they want for false, and so this will do us. This, if we give it a Boolean, we'll either get the TRUE or FALSE. And I better echo this. By the way, I had a bug in this as I was going through and doing this myself. One of the bugs that took me out, it took me about 5 minutes or so to figure out what was going on. I forgot the word echo here. Probably a little bit more than that. It was about 10 minutes. How did I finally find the problem? I went to, the JavaScript was failing. Okay, I had something that, I had this dot value, comma, 20, comma, nothing, because I had nothing that echoed. Close, followed by the close parenthesis for string invalid message. So the, this comma followed by this close paren was causing a JavaScript error. How did I know that I had a JavaScript error? Go to the JavaScript console. So let's go and just remind ourselves of that. Let's go and find that form again. Go forward a little bit here. Okay. So how do you go ahead and find it? It's browser specific, but the developer tools, which I think in Chrome is worth memorizing, Command Option I gave me the developer tools, and go to the console window. If there's any JavaScript errors there, they'll show up, and they'll tell you which line number of your JavaScript had an error, and that's how I found that I'd ended up with this missing thing. It said, hey, you have a comma followed by a closed paren in your call to string invalid message. And I'm like, what? And sure enough, I looked at a view source and saw that I really did have that. So then I went back to the PHP that generated that and saw that, oh, I had JSON encode, but I didn't have echo of JSON encode, and that caused a problem. So, okay, whew. There we are. This is we're on our way. We have string invalid message and report error. Now, string invalid message. Let me save this file here. We kind of wrote string invalid message already, right? Over on the server side in PHP. Let me just go and I want that same function. That's going to be the exact same logic as I had before. Create the error message. I'll have to write report error. We'll do that in a second. But string invalid message, I'll just demo how that's maybe not so bad. Let me go and look at validate.php. Here's my string invalid message. Here, I'm going to copy and paste. Copy. I'm missing that very last line of the return statement. I'll have to remember that. Okay. Go back to the file I was editing before. I want to go ahead and define this JavaScript function. Where's a good place to put your JavaScript code? Up in the head tag is a reasonable place. So we'll go ahead and script. And I guess if you're technical, type equal text JavaScript. That's now become the default with HTML5, so you don't need to say type equal text JavaScript. I will say that last night it was getting kind of late. I was not on my A game. It took me about 2 hours, or an hour and a half or something, to realize that I typed in text/JavaScript, and it just ignored everything. Basically, nothing in that tag got defined as JavaScript. And yeah, I spent a lot of time saying, why is it running when I run it within JavaScript, but when I put it in the browser, it's not running at all, and that was why. Oh, so okay, paste. Okay, I'm inside my here. It turns out, by dumb luck, JavaScript and PHP have some similar syntax. I can use the same comment, unchanged, function string invalid message here. Default values for attributes also allowed in JavaScript. Cool. Oh, dollar signs. PHP needs a dollar sign for a variable. JavaScript doesn't. Okay. But here's a weird thing. Some people don't like this, but JavaScript allows me to have a dollar sign in the variable name. So I'm going to go ahead, because I don't want to change my code. I want to change as little as possible. I'm going to keep dollar signs in my JavaScript variable names. By the way, some people don't like this because a dollar sign tends to mean that, hey, this is some sort of system variable or library variable used in JavaScript, and there's a lot of JavaScript libraries out there. In particular, if you use, what is it, not Node.js, but jQuery. jQuery is a library that it has one uber variable called $, and it uses that variable all over the place. In fact, it even overloads what parenthesis, what function call operator means for that object. And so when you see in jQuery $open paren and then some stuff, yeah, you're looking at their custom add-on to JavaScript by using that variable Java and overloading all sorts of stuff about it. Okay, but in particular, jQuery, the $sign used in jQuery is standard JavaScript. They just overloaded standard JavaScript stuff. It's nothing special they did to the language. But, okay, so because of that, people say, hey, $signs should be reserved for libraries and special things. I'm just going to use them for my variables here, and shh, don't tell anybody. Okay, problem so far, I guess empty string, excess length. Oh, strlen is a little bit different. It's a little bit, JavaScript claims to be object-oriented. .length. It's a method? No, I think it's .length as a field. Okay. If statement looks just like before. String concatenation is not a dot. It's a plus sign. Okay. think we're all good. If not, spaces allowed. And oh, it's not called preg match. Again, this is actually regular expressions are methods within the string class. So stir dot match. That's the JavaScript for calling invoking regular expressions. And in JavaScript, you don't actually use strings. In JavaScript, regular expressions are their own first-class type, and that's pretty cool. And you don't put quote marks around your regular expression, you put slashes. Okay. So there we are, stir.match of this, except one little minor thing. Unicode regular expression properties are not currently supported in JavaScript regular expressions. They're hopefully getting added, but I've been reading that for several years now. So I'm going to fall back to looking for spaces. I use \s to represent white space. That doesn't include all the smart spaces, the thin space and non-breakable space and all these Unicode fancy spaces. But okay, so I'm actually changing the behavior a little bit here. But okay, if that was the case, do that. And then I had the last line was return. Oh, it was another. I think it was the last thing. Okay, if, and then I had problems so far. Triple equals. I can use that in JavaScript as well. Means something a little bit different, but close enough. If problem so far is the empty string, then we'll do something else. Do something else to return. If it was the empty string, we're actually going to return false. And I like that something a little better than the empty string. There's no error. The invalid messages doesn't exist. Otherwise, use problems so far. Okay. So that's exactly the code with a few tweaks made to make it JavaScript. Okay. Whew. That's a lot. Let's take a little break. Go ahead and pause the video here. We've been going for a while, and then we'll finish up. Oh man, finally you're back. It's been forever. Okay. I'm going to need to do a few other things. I'm going to take my, I think I called pluralize here. I'd better go grab my pluralize, put it into JavaScript, do that. Okay, so I went ahead and did that. How are we going to call this method string invalid? So remember the way we did it was on change of the attribute, we're going to go ahead and call string invalid message, take that string and call report error. Okay, so I'm not going to talk about report error a whole lot, except to say this is that DOM surgery, just like before. What is a report error going to do? I'll describe it pretty well. Reporter is going to take a node, and I'll have to think exactly about if I want to use the ID here or the node or what, but hey, go to this node, figure out its ID is something like quest. Hey, where do I want to put the error message? I want to put it right next to that input tag, right? So my screen is going to have the input tag, and then I want the error message to show up right next to it. So here's what I'll do. I guess one thing I could do is I could put right next to that input tag that I have when I'm writing the HTML. I could put a little span right here and say, hey, here's a span that's totally empty, and it's going to have the name quest-error. Okay? And then, why do I do that? So report error knows where to put this error message that's been given about this particular input. This is similar to how we had like the empty paragraph for animal IDs, and then we went and added stuff into that. I could even be a little bit smarter if I wanted. And that approach that I just described works great, except remember it forces the person writing the form to say, oh, not only do I need to make an input named quest, I need to make a little empty span next to it called quest-error. And I just need to remember to do that so the JavaScript code will know where to put things later. I could even be a little bit smarter. I could go ahead and say, hey, here's what report error really is going to do. It's going to be given a node, say that input box. It's going to find out its ID, quest. Okay. It's going to say, hey, we'll take that quest, make a new string, quest-error, string, concatenate that on there. Now go look up the node quest error. If that node doesn't exist, go ahead and make one and put it right next to the node of this input box that I was given. Okay, and you can do all that in JavaScript just fine. It's this, I think, 3 lines of code. So grab the current node, look up its ID, make a new string out of that, look up that node. If it doesn't exist, then call create element and insert the element right next to the node that we had. Okay. And then, once we know that node is there, now go grab that node quest-error, or whatever -error, and set its text, set its inner HTML to be whatever other string I was passed. So report error is going to be kind of nice and flexible and do all of that for us. Okay, so sounds good. Once we have that, we're going to have the first part done. We're going to have it so that when people go ahead and type in A-B and they included some spaces in their favorite color, they shouldn't have done that. Boom, report errors. The string invalid message, we already have that code that we adapted from our PHP server side. We can turn that into JavaScript, get that string. Then I'll pass it to report error. That's going to be the one that actually goes into the DOM and boom, puts that string into the tree somewhere. The other thing I still need to do, though, is make it so that when I submit, it goes and makes sure it doesn't submit and triggers any error message that should be there, especially if a field's required. I need to make sure that I go and try to validate that field, find that it's required but empty, and I need to report that error. In fact, just now, the way I'd done this, there hadn't been this error message here because of the way I reloaded the page, and clicking on submit, that called validateAll. validateAll is going to call each of the individual report errors, and that's why this got triggered there just the way I want it to. And validateAll, all valid, maybe I called it. I guess I haven't added that yet here. Okay, let's go to the form tag. I'm going to add one more action, one more attribute, onsubmit equal, and put some Java code here. Now, this needs to be Java code that returns a Boolean. And here's how the browser cooperates with the JavaScript. It says, hey, I just got to submit. Somebody's clicking on the submit button, great. Hey, but I see that there's this little onsubmit attribute sitting here. Me, the browser, Chrome, is going to say, hey, before I really submit, I'm going to call the JavaScript for onsubmit, get back a Boolean. If that Boolean says true, then all systems green, submit. If that value comes back as false, then the browser says, oh, I'm not really going to submit, even though I know the user just pressed the submit button. Okay, so that's the interplay we're using there between these two programs. There's my window here. Window, bring all to front. There I am. Hi. Glad to see you again. Okay, so we're going to go to this onsubmit. So by the way, if you leave off an unsubmit attribute, it's a little bit like saying return true. Okay. If you think about this, if I add onsubmit and have return true, what will the browser do? The user clicks the submit button. The browser will see, hey, but there's an onsubmit attribute. I'm going to go run that and see if I get back true, and if so, then I'll submit. Yeah, so this would go ahead and have things work. In fact, it's kind of like if you didn't include an onsubmit attribute, it's kind of like this is the default. Okay. Here's what we want. I want to return all valid. All valid is going to be a little bit like my all error messages back from the server side validation. So let's go write all valid. Go up in here. Again, this is JavaScript, all valid. Function, all valid. Return true if and only if all 4 input fields have valid data. Okay. Sounds good. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go and return. Gosh, I had the, what was the first thing I had, the quest. You know, and here's my mental structure. Quest is valid of quest. Now I don't have an is valid yet, so but yeah, here's my brain where I'm headed, is valid of favorite color. The checkbox. Gosh, no validation required for the checkbox is happy. Why? I mean, it's either checked or not. My browser enforces that. I don't need to check that its value is equal to yup because it has to be with my form. Hey, Barlin, aren't you worried about attackers manipulating your form? Well, yeah, but if they manipulate my form, they might as well manipulate this JavaScript function as well. It's all done client side, and I have no control over what they do. So I'm happy with saying if this was a required checkbox, then I might go ahead and have something right here, make sure that checkbox really is checked or something. But as it is, I'm good. So then is valid of message. Okay. So something along the line. What was is valid? Well, remember, it was kind of like string invalid message. Probably sort of like saying not of string invalid message of quest. Okay, and that's actually a lot closer to what I want. Let me grab that. Okay, not string invalid message of quest. Why does that work? Because if this thing returned if it returned false, then there was no error. So this thing, the blue part, returned false. I negate it and get true. So yeah, if there's no error, then this line is true, including that initial negation. And this is true, and this is true. Yeah, okay, so we're good. If there had been an error message, then the string comes back. The string is true-ish. In JavaScript, if you take a string and say not of that string, if it's a non-empty string, that will make it false, and that will cancel this thing. So yeah, okay, I'm pretty happy. This is actually, hey, I'm reusing that string invalid message. My isValid looks pretty good here. There's going to be 2 things I have to worry about. One minor thing is that, oh, string invalid message actually took that other information, didn't it? So now I'm going to go and max lengths of quest, and that was actually PHP echoing. Okay. Now I'm getting less happy about being a programmer. Oh well. Because this is kind of grunge work. That will come back with 15 or 20 or whatever, and then PHP echoed. Oh, I can do that JSON encode thing here, because again I have this Boolean spaces allowed of quest running over this long line. Okay. So that finishes the echo JSON encode, blah blah blah, echoes the PHP block, and then back in the JavaScript, yeah, I want to say string invalid message of open paren, blah blah blah, and close paren. Okay, so whew. So I need to do all this stuff again, which is a pain. I need to do it on this line and this line. Okay. And one other minor little thing. Remember when we had the form and say I don't touch anything, I don't do an onchange, but maybe the required fields. When I hit submit, first of all, I want to not really submit if there are errors, but also I want to trigger the showing of any error messages. And that was a report error that did that. So really what I want to do is I want to say, hey, do string invalid, but call report error again. Remember the Boolean I get, and then come back and use that in my big return statement here. Okay, that's what we'll do. That's the code that is actually posted. Let me go to now my full working version here that is that does all this, and we'll see that all valid. So I made string invalid message. I made a helper called string invalid. What does string invalid do? Takes in the same things just like string invalid message, but that, and it calls string invalid message, passing along everything just along. But then it calls report error of the result, and then it returns that false or that string. Okay, so I just the fact that down in all valid, I'm going to want to repeatedly call string invalid message, save the result, call report error on the string, then come back and return just return what that string invalid message was. So I factored that out into string invalid. So I wrote a little message for that. I think I did a little bit different here. I just gave the node ID, actually passed in the string here. I think when I wrote it, at first I said, hey, just pass in the actual node like this. I changed it to actually pass in quest up here. Oh, that's the other thing I didn't mention in what I was just looking at. Yes, string invalid. If I pass it the node, I'd have to here say document.getElement by ID of quest. So there's where I'm paying for the fact that down when I called string invalid message down here, I used just this before. Well, then I need the document get element by ID up in this other helper. So I went ahead, after writing everything that way, I went back and sort of said, you know, instead of doing it this, I'm going to pass this dot ID, which is still everything fine, string invalid, and then my string invalid function, where'd it go? There we are. String invalid, it went ahead and did a get element by ID to get the actual node, called string invalid message. String invalid message, sorry, it's the report error that I want. When I called report error, I went ahead and passed it the actual node there. So anyway, I wrote it one way, then shifted things a little bit about, hey, am I passing the name of the node or the node itself? And I shifted that a little bit to minimize my calls to document.getElement by ID. Okay, report error. I talked about it briefly. I'm not going to say much about it. Except that here it is. What does it do? Hey, look up the node ID, add the error. If it doesn't already exist, do a get element by ID of this new thing. If it doesn't exist, create a new span and set its, okay. Then, at this point, after finishing this if statement, I know that that span exists. And what is the purpose of report error? Hey, go ahead, grab that node where the error message should go and set its inner HTML to be the message I want. So this is the node surgery. Make a new element and splice it into the tree. Okay. And I needed to give it. I gave it an ID and stuff like that. But basically, hey, you just make a new element if it's needed. If it was already there, I didn't make it again. So, and then what does report error do? This is the heart of report error. Grab the error node and stick in that as the error message. So, okay. Anything else to say in all of this? The important part to get about the structure is that we want to have good program design. If your job is to validate all the fields, you have one master, big master validation method, and then it has a bunch of helpers for individual fields, especially if you can leverage any repeated code, which we did in this case. Sometimes you can't you might have 5 different text inputs, but they all have things that are slightly different, and you can't quite do that. So, oh well. But at the very least, you'll have one big check if everything is valid method, the master method, and it will call helpers, checking if every particular field is valid, input is valid. Should be 1 to 2 lines of code. If it's more than that, pull it out to its own helper function, like we did here, the string invalid message. So, okay, and then realize that, hey, all of these individual helper things check if a single thing is invalid. Want to do a report error, so that's the string invalid. So I reuse making the string message, partly because I had it before. If I had not already had from my client side thing a method called string invalid message, I might have bundled together string invalid message with string invalid. What's the only difference between these two? The call to report error is the big difference there. Okay. I would always have factored out the report error, the stuff that does the tree surgery. If I had 7 different fields, yeah, I want to go ahead and share their report error message, even if some of them are checkboxes, some of them are text inputs, some are whatever. Every field is going to have a report error. That's its own task that is different from generating the message. So I'd always have a master error, check if everything is valid, a bunch of individuals check if this is valid, this is valid, that is valid, that is valid, and then finally one helper report error that does the JavaScript surgery, and that just needs to be written once, the DOM surgery. Okay. Whew. That's pretty cool. We have, again, a good structure of client-side validation. Sounds similar to how we structure a code server-side. It's, a good, robust code organization. The next video is going to be how most of the common validations you want to do can already be done in HTML5 with tags, and you don't actually need to write any JavaScript for a lot of the common validations. If you ever want to do your own custom validations and your own custom error reporting, it's good to know this technique here. So we still want to be able to do all that. Okay, I'll see you soon. Whew. This was a long session, wasn't it? Oh, it's because you took a break, didn't you? And that was a long break you took, I have to say.